been going?
It's been awesome. Yeah, my daughter's having a meltdown, so I had to
Oh,
mute her for a second.
how old is she?
She's 4.
You have meltdowns when they're 4. They have meltdowns when they're 14. You know, like.
Yeah.
By the time they're 24, their meltdowns are a little more refined. But yeah, until then, plenty of meltdowns.
Yeah.
And plenty of experience meltdowns. You know, it's like at a certain point you think it's you until you realize, no, this is just the nature of a child, you know.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and some kids are more prone to it than others. Anyway, so we were discussing, anyone have anything to share in terms of their week as Noahides? Anything happen anyone like to share? We're sharing? Okay. So we were discussing idolatry. What does this mean, idolatry? What are the laws of idolatry? And we're looking here at specific things. The last thing we were discussing was don't debate. You know, there is, of course, that natural human tendency to debate. And there's also, sometimes people want to debate you. They're pulling you into the debate. But if the purpose is a debate, you, like I said, you always lose. If you win, you lose because they're upset at you. If you lose, you lose. They think they're right. There's no advantage to a debate. If someone's asking information, of course, we always want to share whatever information we have. And even if you think you have very little, well, if you have something they don't have, so you're a teacher. Like Lubavitcher would say, if you know 1 letter and they know none, give over that 1 letter. If you know 2 letters, wow, you've got so much information you can share with them. So however little you think you know, there are billions of people on this planet that know less. So therefore, you all have what to share. You all have what to give others. So that was the last thing we were saying. You know, I should shut off my phone because it might otherwise disturb us the whole night. Let me go get it. Sorry, I just didn't want us to keep on being, hearing that beautiful music in the background. All right. So the next law in this topic is that you're not allowed to research anything that's what we call an idolatrous concept to sort of figure it out if it's true or not. I mean, like you sort of know it's false, but maybe you're curious. Anything, now this isn't only true for idolatry. Any thought that will cause you to abandon a fundamental principle of Torah, faith, any such thought is forbidden to pursue. There's lots of different thoughts we can think that are contrary to worshiping God. There's lots of different things we can think that if we pursue them, it'll put us in a very bad space, in a negative space, in an unhappy space, in an idolatrous space. In other words, it's not only literally idolatry. You're questioning God's oneness. Is he really one or two? Does he have a body or not? The false prophecy. And you're just putting your minds and your hearts in the wrong places. And all of that is forbidden. And obviously accepting any of this as true, even if you don't worship it, even if you're saying, well, I'm not going to worship it, but I still think there's some truth to it, that in itself is already something forbidden. Because once you already go in this direction, it takes a few more steps, obviously, but in a few more steps, the person can worship idols himself. And therefore, anything that would be leading in that direction is already forbidden. So if I think these thoughts and I think these thoughts and I think these thoughts, it's eventually going to come to put me in a space where I'm going to do something that's wrong. And therefore, we barricade ourselves, we protect ourselves against anything sacred to us. We have to set up many levels of protections. So it's not like if I trip accidentally, I violate a basic precept. So if I'm going to trip and fall, I'm going to trip and fall on a barricade, which is around a barricade, which is around a barricade before I actually get to the law itself. And that's true, especially for something as like idolatry, because idolatry is so significant. And that's why we don't want you studying it and thinking about it and speculating and wondering and analyzing, because all of that inevitably puts your mind and hearts in the wrong places. Any questions or thoughts on any of this? Okay. So what makes you liable for idol worship? So obviously a lot. And honestly, we're not going to go into it too much because I don't think it's that relevant. So we're not going to so much focus on it. I'm just going to see if anything that I think is noteworthy. So there's absolutely no difference what type of idol a person would be worshiping. If they're worshiping a statue, if they're worshiping the mountain or the sea or the sun or the moon, if they're worshiping an animal, if they're worshiping a person, if they worship in the way these things are normally worshiped, if they worship as God is worshiped in the temple, any and all of the above is forbidden. If there's steps to the worship, any step in the process would make one forbidden for idolatry. Now, in terms of idolatry, there are 4 ways God was served in the temple. Any of those 4 ways, if one does them for anyone besides God, that's forbidden, even if normally you don't serve the idol that way. Bowing down, we bowed down to God in the temple. Slaughtering, the sacrifices were slaughtered. Burning and then offering that as an offering. Burning incense, and pouring a libation. All 4 of those ways were how God was served in the temple. The people bowed to him. They offered animals, which they slaughtered and then burnt on the altar. They burnt incense on a different altar, and they poured libations on the altar. So if that was done for any other service besides God, even if that's not the way that's worshiped, that's a horrific transgression, because those are ways we serve God. For everything else, you only transgress if you serve it the way it's served. Like there was an idol in ancient times that they served by throwing stones to it. Don't ask. They would throw stones, and that was a way of service. So if you threw stones to a different idol, well, you're not serving it. You're mocking it. You're disgracing it. Only for that specific idol that you throw stones to is it a problem. But slaughtering, burning incense, even if this is not how this idol is served and we throw stones to it, we don't burn incense. But if you burn incense to it, it's a problem. Because burning incense is for God. Slaughtering the animal and sacrificing it's for God. Pouring a libation and burning it is for God. And bowing is for God. There are myriads and myriads and myriads of details on this, which I'm not planning going into because I don't think they're really so relevant for us, because I don't think that's really our issue. I do think some areas in the concept of idolatry is our issue, but I don't think this really is.
People and the cats love us most.
Larissa, did you have a comment, or was that one of your kids? Thanks for joining us. If a person verbally accepts upon himself any idol as his God, that's absolutely forbidden. Any created physical being, any created spiritual being, any force, anything other than God himself. Now, the same way we can't bow to an idol, we can't bow to a person who's viewing himself as an idol. Now, obviously, sometimes this isn't so relevant in our world, but in previous generations, there were definitely people that established themselves as idols and want everyone to bow to them. And sometimes you bowed, not because you really believed they were the idol, but because you didn't want to get killed, which might have been the other option. Now, obviously, ideally, it's better to get killed. But if one does bow, not out of belief, but out of fear of the repercussions of not serving this man who's decided he's an idol, who decided he's a god, then one is okay, because we understand it's not, you're not supposed to do it, but we know you're not doing it out of service. Like, let's say there was an officer or a priest who was wearing around his neck a cross or something like that, an image of an idol, or who's carrying an idol. Can you bow to them? In theory, no. Even though you're bowing to them and not the idol, but bowing, since they're, not that they say they're an idol, but they're holding an idol and you're bowing, it's sort of like bowing to the idol. Now, let's say you're supposed to take off your hat. You know, in earlier times, taking off your hat was a sign of respect. Well, you're not allowed to take off your hat to the idol because that's giving it respect. You're not allowed to bow to it. That's bowing to the idol. But what do you do if you're going to get in massive trouble if you don't bow to this officer? So one thing you could do would be to like take off your hat before the officer walks by. So you didn't bow to the idol because you're already in this bent position before the man with the idol comes by, and then he could walk past you and you were okay. You didn't bow to the idol, you were just bent over with your hat off, and then he walked by.
Hey, Cyril, I have a question.
Sure.
Sorry to interrupt. I thought that you weren't supposed to bow to people either as well. Is that wrong? Or
meaning like, okay, if a king walked by, you wouldn't be allowed to bow to them?
Yes, right, exactly.
It depends how it's viewed. Meaning, there's definitely the concept of not bowing at all, because bowing reserved for God. But
Right.
since really bowing for God literally meant prostrating, and since you're doing this without any shred of idolatry involved, he's not wearing a cross, he's not, there's no connection. It's an honor to the king. You would be allowed to do it if you would have a problem if you didn't. You would definitely be allowed
Okay.
to do it in that case. It wouldn't be like a person couldn't do that. A lot of times when you're bowing to a king or to an officer, to a noble, people understand you're bowing to respect the office. It's not per se the person, it's the office. So you're giving honor to the office by bowing.
Okay.
But if this was a priest, it would be a problem. Because we understand that bowing to the priest, just as we're saying, if a king passes by and you're bowing, you're giving honor to his office. So if a priest passes by and you're supposed to bow, it's a big problem because you're giving honor to his office. So that's why the priest would be the biggest problem. The priest would be pretty much a problem. So again, let's say if the priest walked by, you knew he was walking by, you could take off your hat, but you couldn't bow. Because the bowing, even if you're doing it beforehand, that trick to try to get out of the situation wouldn't work because you're still in act of bowing and you can't bow before a priest. But you can take off your hat before the priest. Because taking off your hat isn't really submission, it's just the custom. I don't know if it's still a custom. It used to be the custom to take off your hat as a means of honor. But bowing, you would not be allowed to do at all. That would not work because he's a priest. So therefore, you should avoid standing in a place where you know the priests are walking by and expect you to bow. Because you don't want to be rude and you can't do it. You can't light candles before an idol. But if, now again, you could say, but what if that's not the means we serve it? So if it's not the means we serve it, there might be room to light candles. But if lighting candles is part of the service, then definitely this is considered absolutely, absolutely, absolutely forbidden. In other words, you can't do it, but it's not a capital offense. It's not idolatry. But if it's how it's served, if it's traditional to light candles before this idol, or to bring food to the idol, or to burn incense to the idol, then any of those things would be considered absolute idolatry. There are many, many, many laws. I'm not really going into all the laws because I don't know how relevant they are. This is really just a minor, minor touch on numerous laws about idolatry. Now, you obviously are forbidden to make a statue or an image and an idol that's worshipped. If you make it for yourself, if you're telling somebody else to make it for you, if you're saying you're not going to serve it, you just want the statue around. You can't make images of statues of idols, again, if you're going to serve it or not. You can't buy an image of a statue, even if you don't mean to serve it. Even if you intention to serve it, you can't own it. By the same token, and this might be a little more relevant, you can't make certain statues for decoration, even if they're not idols, they're statues. But since statues, again, are pretty close to idols, because lots of idols were statues, so therefore you can't have certain types as well. So the one that's relevant to us probably the most would be a non-idolatrous statue that is prohibited to make, you only have for decoration, is something with accurate three-dimensional features of the full frontal human form. It might have the backside, it might not have the backside. In our world, a very common example would be a Barbie doll. A Barbie doll is three-dimensional. A Barbie doll's figures are roughly proportional to human. A Barbie doll is expressing the whole front side of the human. Also the back. It doesn't have to also have the back. It happens to in a Barbie doll. But such a doll is a big problem, because that will be considered like this statue. Now again, the Barbie doll isn't made for worship. You're not planning on worshiping it, and you don't know anyone else on this planet that does worship it. That doesn't make a difference. Because idolatry is such a deep-rooted desire in mankind, as we spoke last week, how billions of people in this world, one way or another, are idolatrous. They're not atheists. Most of them are idolatrous. If they're atheists, I guess they worship themselves. But most people in this world are idolatrous one way or another. So therefore, anything that comes too close is forbidden, because we don't even want to go anywhere in that direction. So it's completely forbidden to carve or make something like that. A three-dimensional protruding human form, the head and the body. It has to have the head, it has to have the body. If it just had the head, it wouldn't be a problem. If it just had the body, it wouldn't be a problem. It has to have a head, a body, and the features have to be proportionate. If features are obviously wildly disproportionate, it wouldn't be a problem either. If it's flat and it's a painting, it's not a problem. We're talking about something three-dimensional. Now, when we're talking about this, we're only talking about the prohibition on the human form. If someone is making these beautiful ornate sculptures to decorate a building, no problem. We're talking specifically the human form is prohibited. It's the most severe prohibition, because even when there's no intent of idolatry, not by the person making it, not by the person selling it, not by the person buying it, not by the person owning it, there's no intent of idolatry on any level, it's still absolutely forbidden. And again, you could make an engraving of a human form, you can make a tapestry of a human form, you can make an embroidery of a human form, you can make a painting of a human form. We're talking specifically about something three-dimensional, that's the problem. So if a person for some reason wanted to just make a human head and sculpture a human head, that would be permissible. If they wanted to make the body without the head, that would be permissible. If they wanted to make a profile, that would be permissible. We're talking about a full frontal face with body proportionate. There's our problem. It's also prohibited to, in the same fashion, to make forms of angels forms which have a cherubic, angelic, childlike face. Any other forms, the concepts of the angels of the chariot, which is a human, a lion, and an eagle on one body. Now, what do you do if you have a daughter and she has a doll? So if you have a daughter or a son who owns a doll, that is, first of all, you can check and see. I've definitely gone through all my children's dolls every once in a while because things creep up, and you sort of spaced out when they got them, so you forgot. So every once in a while, I have to remind myself and recheck. So if they have any dolls in the house, check. Now, first of all, like a rag doll wouldn't count, right? Because that's not a proportional body. That's rags. I mean, like the Raggedy Ann style dolls. But but there's lots of dolls that do count. I mean, it's not only the Barbie doll. There are many dolls out there in the world today that exactly fit this problem. And what you need to do, not to break your daughter's heart, is cut off something that makes it no longer a complete human image. My father would always slice off the nose. We were always devastated. All our noses were flat-nosed dolls because the tip of it got cut off. I try to do the ear because I think that's less in their face. I try to do it when my daughter's not looking and hope she doesn't realize. Sometimes she realizes, sometimes she doesn't. I've had plenty of tantrums over it, trust me. It's a law. It's literally considered idol prohibition under the concept of idolatry to own it. And therefore, it's very, we get down to our children and explain to them that this is God doesn't let. It's too close to the idol for comfort. If you don't have children that have dolls, you don't have this issue. I did have a very expensive, beautiful, like literally China doll that my daughter got. It was crazy. It was like impossible to whatever. I won't go into that sad story. But most dolls, the cheap dolls are really simple. You just slice off a little bit of the ear, and don't ever bring a China doll into your house because you're gonna have a problem. But for the cheap dolls, that's the solution to this issue. Obviously, if somebody had, let's say there was a coin and the coin had a three-dimensional figure protruding from it. It wasn't flat, as often coins are not flat. And sometimes it's just the face, but it actually was a whole body. Are you allowed to use such a coin that had an entire human body, proportionate, protruding, so it's three-dimensional from the coin? The answer here is yes, because it's designated for business. It's designated for currency. So as such, it has a function. So therefore, it's not considered part of idolatrous issues, and one is allowed to do that, and you don't have to avoid using that coin or avoid owning that coin. So we're saying any form besides the forms that basically we're scared of is forms of a human or forms of an angel. Because the fear is that even though it was not made for idolatrous purposes, and you're not owning it for idolatrous purposes, but who knows? Maybe, fifth cousin once removed, someone could come to worship it. But we only have that concern with the human form and the angel form, because this was the most common places of worship. But any other form, an animal, a bird, a fish, something fictitious, a dragon, none of those things bother us. All of those things, if they're just made for decoration, it could be three-dimensional, frontal, face and body, and it's okay. Now, there's a prohibition to setting up a statue, a pillar, to not even as you're worshiping it, but this is where we gather to worship. In other words, let's say there was a stone, And everyone, so it could be something natural, it could be something man-made, and everyone gathers to the stone to worship. The fear is that if people do this long enough, instead of remembering this is the spot where we worship, this becomes the item that we worship. There's such a stone in Mecca. Again, Mecca is the Islamic religion. Islamic is not idolatrous. But there's a stone there. Now, that was the stone that they would gather to worship. But from gathering to worship it, it's too close to worshiping it itself. And therefore, anything along those lines is forbidden. Now, speaking of Islamic religion, which we mentioned last week, and we said it's not idolatrous. There's no belief in any God besides God. There's no belief in the humans. Muhammad's not viewed as a God. He's viewed as a prophet. So there's no concept there. They don't make any form of God that they worship. A mosque doesn't have anything idolatrous in it. You're allowed to walk into a mosque, no problem. So is the Islamic religion okay? No, not at all. It's not at all idolatrous, but it's still forbidden. Why is it forbidden? Because we're not allowed to create man-made religions. Meaning, what we've been discussing until now is a prohibition of idolatry. And obviously, in America, that's happened. That's very prevalent in its form. And in other places in the world, it happens even more overtly idolatrous forms. But even a religion that's not idolatrous, which is far better than an idolatrous religion, but even such a religion is problematic because God doesn't want us to make man-made religions. So if somebody was worshiping the Islamic faith, they would not be transgressing idolatry, but they would be transgressing something else, which isn't as severe as idolatry, but is also a prohibition, which is making their own religion. Because in essence, if you're making your own religion, you're sort of denying the essence concept that God wants us to worship him through the Noahide laws. I mean, if you have to make another religion to serve him, you're saying God can't be served as he said he wants to be served. He's saying, I want to be served by the Noahide laws. And you're serving him in any of these other fashions. So therefore, it's like, wait. God's saying, you want to serve me as I want to be served? This is how I'm telling you to serve me. You're making up this newfangled, your own invention way of serving me. Don't serve me by your ideas. Serve me by my ideas. It's like in general, the concept that if God, as the infinite creator, and we're finite man, how does finite ever bridge the gap to infinity? There's finite and there's infinite. How do the two meet? Only as he says. This is true for a Jew or for a Noahide. God's infinite, we're finite. All of my human man-made spirituality can never reach infinity because all of my spirituality is ultimately finite as I'm ultimately finite. So how do I bridge the gap with the creator? How does finite and infinite fuse? Because he's coming down to us. He's giving us the ways to connect to him. He, as the ultimate infinity, is saying, here's a way finite can reach infinity. So if I ever want on my own to do my own sense of spirituality, things which might make me feel full and satisfied, and I feel this is a very great, beautiful service of God, if I made it up, it's nice, maybe it's got nothing to do with God. To do with God is only what he tells us. So therefore, if men come up with as I'm saying, a man-made religion, they're worshiping God, they're not worshiping idols. It's the absolute God, it's the creator that has no form, no image. That's all kosher, kosher, kosher. But the point is, what is your man-made ideas have anything to do with infinity? Have any way of reaching God, have any way of connecting to God? To connect to God, it has to be how he's saying. Crystal, do you have a question? I can't hear you because you're on mute.
Sorry, I did have a question. So I was just curious, is this specifically maybe to like make sure that we don't go down the road of idolizing a human being like the future Mashiach, or or to make sure that we don't do that we never worship a human being, that we always understand that
So you're
God
saying
is
that's why we can't have these man-made religions?
No, I'm just saying, like, as far as like the human form is like
We're going back to the human form.
So careful that we don't.
Probably because that was the most natural go-to. If you would think of the ancient religions,
Mhm.
the pagan idolatry, obviously there were other things they worshipped, but if you think of like the pantheon, the Greeks, the Romans, all those idols, it was the human form that was the most common, that was most prevalent. So really, in truth, it could have been forbidden everything, because any form could perhaps lead to idolatry. But since we're talking about something so far removed, meaning we all know this was like, go back to your Barbie doll. The Barbie doll, the manufacturer had nothing to do with idol worshiper, and the purchaser, you have no thoughts of idol worship. And it's still forbidden unless you deform it in some way. Why? Because idolatry is so dangerous. So that's already an enormous fence to prevent us from idolatry. So to make that comprehensive also of fish and cows and pigs and horses was not done, because though they could have been worshipped, anything could have been worshipped in ancient times. We know the ancient Egyptians worshipped sheep. I mean, everything probably at some point has been worshipped, but it's not so prevalent. But the human form is like a go-to. So that's why the human specifically, even in such a very, very, very neutral situation where nobody on the line had any sense of idolatry, still we're saying it's forbidden unless you deface it in some way.
Gotcha. Unless you're a teenage girl and it's a Pop Boy brand.
Right.
Band or something, right?
Exactly. Then we know there's idol worship involved. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Make
Thank
sure to
you.
deface that one really well.
Yeah. Thank you for answering.
Sure. Any other questions? Okay. So we were discussing here the idea of what we're calling a man-made religion, which is any religion besides serving God as a Noahide. And we were saying how it is forbidden because God says, worship me as I want to be worshipped, as I'm telling you to worship me. Now, obviously the belief in the Trinity is an idolatrous concept. It's believing that God, or it depends which faction of Christianity you're going to call yourself, God, or some even say a second separate divinity, has the characteristics of a body, has human form, has a body's image. So that right away would be idolatrous. We said that if the religious statue is a pillar where people come to worship, that's forbidden. That's what is biblically prohibited. As I said, like the Kaaba stone in Mecca, even though we're saying the Islamic religion is not idolatrous, but since people are gathering at the stone and there's all these rituals and honors connected to the stone, it's already something that's too close to comfort for us. It's too easy to see people veering from gathering here and doing lots of worship to beginning to worship it itself. In other words, that's how deep rooted in man is this need, is this desire to serve an idol. And that's why anything that could come close on any level is prohibited. Now, if somebody was praying to God, but in the prayers, he was accepting someone as God's prophet, and that's part of his prayers, that would also be forbidden. Because that is pulling a created being, pulling someone human into the idea of worshiping God. When we're in worship, we only bow to God himself, meaning God obviously has prophets. There are many biblical prophets. And we believe in the prophets. We don't bow to the prophets. And if we're praying, we're talking to God. So don't bring God's prophets into our prayers. We don't bow to them, because if we are bowing to them when we're talking about God, again, it's too close to comfort, this idea of now we're bowing to a human while serving God, as if the human has become part of God on some level. Again, it's just too close comfort. It's too close to idol worship to associate this as God's prophet who we're bowing to in our service of God. We're like, don't go there. Don't go anyone there. And And if you're bowing to a person as a religious service, even if the person didn't declare himself a god, that's considered idolatry. If you burn incense in front of the image of a person, the person did not declare himself a god. But you're burning incense to him, it's like you're declaring him a god. And therefore, it's considered idolatry. You're praying to the statue of a person. Person didn't say he was a god. But you're praying to the statue of a person. This is making you an idol worshiper of this person who he didn't declare himself a god, but you're making him a god. By bowing to a person, by praying to a person, by burning incense to a person, by doing any of these things, in this person or a statue of the person, a representation of the person, you're serving idols even though they didn't declare they were God, but you're declaring they're God by all of these acts. And therefore, all of these acts are forbidden. There's an enormous obligation to eliminate idol worship, and there's enormous prohibition in benefiting from idol worship. So anything that could be done to destroy anything of idolatry that you have an obligation to. Anything that will come that will be part of something that will come into your possession, that anything to do with idol worship on any level, even if it's valuable, you have an obligation to destroy anything. You obviously can't possess anything of idol worship. You can't derive benefit from anything of idol worship. You have to destroy or nullify anything that you can have a choice, anything that would be, like let's say someone gave you you inherited an expensive necklace, a cross. You have to destroy it. You're not allowed to own it. You're not allowed to have benefit from it. You can't even sell it because that would be having benefit from it. You have to literally break it down. That's an obligation because this is something of idol worship. If a person would find something, it has to be something valuable, something gold, silver, silk, and this is something that will be normatively, has on it pictures that will be the normative pictures of idol worship, then you can't have benefit from them. You have to destroy them. The dragon or the celestial planets, a complete sun, a complete moon, any of these things. If you know that such things were used for idol worship, then you can't have benefit from it, even though you just found it and it's just a pretty golden whatever. You have to stumble across a piece of gold. You're not allowed to use it. You're not allowed to use that silk. You're not allowed to use that silver. You're not allowed to use that pottery, that clay. You're not allowed to use any of it because it's most liable that it was used for idolatry. If you would find it broken, shattered, then that already nullified it. So then you are allowed to use it. If it was chipped away, so it's no longer respectable, it was already, broken in some fashion, then it would be, now if you have artwork or vessels that have images of crosses, so we can't benefit from them because generally that'd be considered something that'd be used for idol worship, even if they're not very important, respectable. We're not talking about gold or silver, but still it would be assumed that this would be something of idol worship. Unless you would say that no, by now where you are, they're used, it's a non-idolatrous context, and that if it is truly non-idolatrous, you would be allowed to. So when we go back to the jewelry, it's again, putting this in perspective, it's a little debatable. Meaning, if there was obviously a plain cross, obviously a cross is used as service, and obviously it's forbidden. Obviously, you have to, if you find it somewhere, you destroy it. But if it was a necklace, this would go back to then the question of, well, what was the function of the necklace? How was the necklace viewed? Was it viewed as part of service, in which case it has to be destroyed? Or was it viewed, the person bought it purely as jewelry and you know they had no intention of religious service at all? It was just a piece of jewelry they liked. Now that's sometimes hard to figure out. And obviously if you just found one, you'd have no way of knowing, so you'd have to veer on the side of caution. But if you know that this cross was not, this gold cross necklace was not bought for worship, was not worn by a particularly religious person, it really was just a sentimental piece of jewelry or something along those lines. You can't wear it, obviously, but you would be allowed to sell it. You don't have to destroy it. As versus if a cross was used as part of worship, like, I mean, obviously a priest cross or a religious person that uses a cross and kisses a cross, and, you know, to that person, the cross symbolizes their religious service, but then for sure you'd have to destroy it. But if you know that it was just a piece of jewelry to the person, so then you could derive benefit from it, which means if you happen to find it or inherited it or something like that, you would be allowed to sell it. Now, if you're in doubt, like how was this used, you would look at the local place and see, well, what's the local level of religiosity, or how much are these items worshipped? And you could assume that this item that you're not sure about was used as is used typical to that place. You know, and again, one could be lenient if you would say, well, a lot of people here own this without any religious intent, and a lot of people here own this with religious intent. So I'm not really sure what's majority. It's very close to 50-50. I don't really know. You could go on the side of lenient if it's that close that you're really dubious which is the ruling here. If there was something that was actually used as an idol, but it got mixed up with a bunch of other things, that now you don't know which one is the idol or not, because if you had a little clay doll that you know was used in worship, you're in a Buddhist area, okay, so you know this is a little Buddha that was worshipped. It's with a bunch of other such figures that were not worshipped, but it's mixed in and you don't know which one it is. If it's part of a large group, so it's nullified to the majority, you can use the whole group and you don't have to lose your benefit from the whole group. If there was a goblet that's used for idol worship mixed with a bunch of other goblets and you don't know which one is the idol worshipped goblet, but it's amid a bunch of other goblets, you could just use all of them. It just becomes nullified. Because it's obviously you can't mix it into to lessen its status. We're talking about if accidentally this is what happened. And now we just can't tell the difference. In general, anything that has anything to do with idolatry, we can't benefit from. So for example, if there was a knife that was used to serve an idol because they cut up bread for this idol with this knife, then you can't derive any benefit from that knife. The knife is around, you need a knife to use. We don't derive anything from, well, nobody worshiped the knife. True, but since the knife was used for the service of the idol, the knife itself became taboo. We don't go anywhere near it. Now, obviously, there are some things that are served as idols and we're allowed to benefit from because, you know, all natural objects Anything not man-made and that was not physically altered, even though it served as an idol, we benefit from it. I mean, think of the sun and the moon, most classical idols out there. Is every idolatrous people almost worship the sun, worship the moon. I mean, for sure, that's an ancient given idol. But obviously, it's not man-made, and nobody can do anything to alter it. So therefore, we're allowed to derive benefit, whatever benefit you can get from the sun and the moon, or the wind, or the stars, or the sand, or any of these natural things, as long as they were not altered by humans, then the fact that they were worshipped by an idol doesn't make them taboo for our own benefit. If there's a certain tree that's worshipped for idols, we're still allowed to eat from the fruits of that tree, as long as they didn't do anything to the tree to change it in any way. It's just a naturally growing tree that we know in this area, the tree is viewed as an idol. Therefore, they don't eat the fruits. So there's plenty of fruits around. No problem. You're allowed to enjoy them because God made the tree. He made the fruits. It's not the tree's fault if someone's worshiping it as an idol. So it's not a problem. But if something happened that marked the body of that fruit tree or that animal or that mountaintop, something was engraved into it. It wasn't worship from a distance. It was worship up close. Then we're not allowed to derive benefit. If someone was slaughtering an animal to serve an idol, even if they didn't finish, once they started slaughtering the animal, you can derive no benefit from that animal because it's already part of idol worship. If someone but again, if it's man-made, it's not a problem. If someone bows down to the earth, you're still allowed to walk on that ground. It's not like that ground became forbidden because other people are bowing to it. But if someone did something to it, man-made, it's forbidden. So if someone made a hole, if someone made a pit, if someone made a cave as part of idol worship, then you can have no benefit from those items. And to nullify it, you have to destroy it. If people worship waves, you can derive benefit from the wave. But if people worship waves and therefore they took the wave out and they took the water out and now there's a flask of water, you can't derive benefit from that flask because man has now altered what was natural in his service. So man's altered what was natural, you can't benefit from it. So there's lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of rules along these lines. But if we spoke before about trees and we said, Crystal, do you still have a question or was that your hand raised from before?
I was going to ask another question
Okay.
about, but you're getting ready to talk about trees. I did some research about trees as far as like when did they begin to come inside during, like the winter time frame, and that, from what I could find, it talked about, very early on, like in ancient, like Ireland and where, in the north where it gets really, really cold, that they would bring evergreens into the house just because it stayed green, and because everything else was like brown and everything. So I guess I have a question about like, this time of year and having a tree. I'm a little, I guess and even like going outside and like deriving benefit, from, people who put, like lots of lights on their houses and big Santa Clauses and everything. And, like where is the line there with idolatry? Is it absolutely a no? Or I guess I'm curious.
So
about
you're
some
saying,
of
so what would be the benefit? Would the benefit be that you say, oh, that's so pretty, or would the benefit be that you're driving and it's dark and now there's light out? Like which do you mean by the benefit?
I think, I guess if you're walking at night, you benefit from the light, but I'm talking about, like they have things where you physically go and you can drive through and like look through lights and stuff because the lights are pretty, like they have like Santa Clauses on houses or, or like
So that would be considered deriving benefit. That would be forbidden because that would definitely be deriving benefit because this is done as a ritual of worship. 100%.
Okay.
Now, even what you're saying with the pine trees, so I know like I know like a lot of people from Russian background, they say, oh no, it's not Christian. It's just like a sign of life. It's just that we bring it in as a sign of life.
Mhm.
So maybe in some areas of the world it was done that way. You're saying in ancient times there might have been something just to cheer up all the brown with some green. But
Right.
at this point in this culture, it's definitely associated with the religion, which goes back to what we said before, that when in doubt, look at how it's served in the area. So in Alabama, pine trees, if they're brought into the house in December, are
Yeah.
part of the service.
Right.
If you were in Moscow and you want to argue with me on it, I don't know. Maybe nowadays it'll overtly say as part of service. And it was just during the 70 years of the communist regime that they couldn't say Christian, so they said it was just the New Year symbol. I don't know
Okay.
nowadays what they say in Moscow, but I know what they say in Alabama. So
Right.
wherever you are, that's the service. Yeah, and it's very true. That's a very good example of something that's natural.
Mm-hmm.
But how is man deforming it? How is man marking it?
Yeah.
Because he's using it as part of his service. Now,
Right.
again, if you were driving and it's dark and now there's all these lights on the road, so it's easier for you to see, we wouldn't say you're not allowed to drive on those roads. We wouldn't say
Right.
close your eyes when you drive.
Mm-hmm.
That's very like indirect benefit. You weren't driving there because now it's more lit up, but in September you wouldn't drive those roads at night, but in December you can.
Right.
But if you're walking around to say, oh, look at those pretty lights,
Mm-hmm.
someone that said to his child, a rabbi, when he was saying to his child, it was December time, and he was like, oh, look at those pretty lights. And the father replied, those aren't lights, those are darkness. So it's darkness. And it's important for us to recognize it, and therefore we can't attribute to it, you can't attribute to it beauty. You can't attribute to it grace. You can't attribute to it anything, because that will be considered honoring the idol that's being worshipped by those lights. Even though you could say that the people hanging them up are not so religious, and they're not. It's just
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
yeah, they're 100%. They're not. But still, because, and if they hung it up in September, I mean, listen, on Devon now they have lights all the time, I think. If they
do. Yeah.
if they hung it up in September, okay. But if they're hanging it up in December, even if they're not so religious, but they're hanging it up in December, and they just leave it a long time before and after because it's pretty, but still, it's just because in this country, this is part of that service, and even if they're not so religious, this is part of that service. And that's we just yeah. If a store will be having all this, decorations in December and January, if at all possible, you're not supposed to shop in that store. Because it's indirectly benefiting the idol, so to speak. Now, again, if it's the only store around and you have no store to go to, it'll be incredibly difficult to find a store that's not decorated and have to drive 2 hours to find such a store. Okay, you can buy from the store. But if you have an option,
Right.
then you shouldn't, because this will be considered part of participating, indirectly benefiting the deity that they're worshiping.
Right. I tried
Yeah,
to walk.
I think
walk
this
the
is.
line.
Oh yeah, I think that like this had me thinking about it the last few days too, like Black Friday. It's not religious in nature at all, but certainly the focus is Xmas shopping, right? And so I would love to hear, Cyril, what you think about Black Friday shopping. I don't do it personally.
I never thought of it in any way religious. I think if it's an idol, it's the idol of commercialism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Which
that's
honestly,
the
most
one idol that America worships, probably.
Exactly. I was gonna say most holidays are focused on commercialism, honestly, in the United States. It's not really religion anymore for
Right.
many people. But it had me thinking about, because Black Friday shopping is so geared and marketed towards Christmas shopping. I was just thinking, like, I mean, I don't personally
I really am
engage, but
well, the truth is, it would be wonderful to do some research if its origins in any way is there any Christian origin the month before a date? But when I was a kid, there wasn't Black Friday. So I think it's a more modern, innovative. It's like we call these Harlequin days, you know.
Yeah, I mean, like you said about shopping somewhere where they have, you know, Christmas decorations, it's very focused on that, at least from my experience and what I've seen, like on emails that I've gotten from places that I shop, or going to their website or whatever. You know, there's trees and there's lights and there's Santa Claus, and it's very focused on the commercial or the what I would consider the non-religious perspective of those holidays. But I mean, still, you're almost supporting those ideals. I don't know.
That's very interesting.
Just thinking about it.
No, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. Let me look to see if I can find exactly where it speaks here, the law about not going to those stores.
Yeah.
Because it must be right around what we're learning here.
And, you know, I was just, you know, with the lights, you know, I think here, because we are the beginning of Central Time Zone, like it gets dark here at 4:30, you know, so I think, you know, like, and this is where I said, you know, we tried to like walk the line, because, you know, it's snowflake light. And so it's like, you know, it's like you shine a snowflake on your house, and it's like the snowflake, you know, projects itself. It's like a little snowflake projector on your house. But it's like, you know, it's like I could see where, you know, you're deriving benefit, and people are going to assume it's, you know, a Christian thing because of the time of year. Although for us, I mean, it's more like, you know, well, it's dark at 4:30, and but
Well,
yeah,
is it used year round, or is the snowflake only?
No. We got it because it gets, I mean, like, it's this time of year, you know, where the
dark
time changes and everything.
It's pretty dark here also, but 4:30 is not so light here either.
But, you know, that's why everybody puts up their, you know, starts putting up their Christmas lights. So, I mean, it is what it is. If it's idolatry, it's idolatry, and we need to talk to our 7-year-old about it and try to explain it and take it down.
Right. I'm still looking here. Haven't found the law here. I know there's a law, and I know it's somewhere. We should have actually come across it by now. I might have missed it. I did not find it, but I know it's here.
Yeah, Crystal, I know stuff like that's hard. When you've been doing things that you don't consider part of that religion or part of those holidays, but still you're worried about a line that it could be crossing.
Yeah. And, you know, the thing is, it's like, and I know you have little ones too, and I think, you know, talking about like the loneliness of the Noahide, it's like, I'm fine. You know what I mean? But it's just like, it's so hard for them, you know?
So this is the law. Okay, Danielle, this is how the law is written. If a town of idol worshipers is participating in a festival for their idol, like Chicago or, you know, wherever you are in Alabama, and has some shops that are decorated for the festival and others that are not, it's forbidden to buy anything in the direct decorated shops. Since it's assumed they're adorned for the sake of the idol worship. And if you buy merchandise there, you're supporting the owners in their idol worship or in their donation of funds for idolatrous purposes. If you transgressed and bought from them, you could benefit from your purchases.
Right.
If there's no alternative available, or be hardship to travel to an undecorated shop, it's like really far from you, it is not forbidden to purchase a necessity from a decorated shop. So going back to
Yeah.
to Black Friday with their Santas,
Right.
see, I, as an Orthodox Jew, never connected Black Friday to the holidays in December. It never crossed my mind.
Interesting.
I know you're right that I guess that
I worked in retail, so it definitely is. I can tell you.
Right. Yeah, I could say I just probably was too naive to link the two.
You
In my
shopped
head,
online.
this is November, you know. I'm not thinking of anything along those lines. But based on what we just read, I would say it would go back to the decorated and undecorated. You know what I'm saying? If you see among the shops you shop that some, you know, have their red and green and some don't, so then ideally you should patronize online the ones that don't.
Right. Right.
So that you're not indirectly supporting, you know, this concept. Even by you buying from there, you could be boosting their sales and making them think, oh,
Right.
we should put more red and green next year.
Right.
You know,
Right.
so that
Yeah,
will be the point.
definitely.
And if there's a store that doesn't, I'm not such a shopper online or offline, so I don't really know. But if you've noticed there's stores that don't, then you should
Yeah.
patronize those. If everyone does, there's no concept of finding one that doesn't, then I don't know. I mean, I think, I guess we really have to think. I don't know. I really still don't believe it's not religious in origin. It's commercial in origin, meaning
Yeah.
I'll Google. We can all do some research to see what initiated, and we might be surprised. Maybe a church started it. You
Yeah.
know?
Well, like Crystal said, I mean, where's the line? Is their website or their building, you know, decorated in snowflakes and white lights, or is it decorated very clearly with Christmas trees and Santa Clauses? And you know, there's also you know, that, like, are they decorating because they decorate every time of year for whatever's going on in the time of year? So, you know, something that's not really religious or
So,
even holiday
To go
focused.
to Crystal's question about like putting snowflake lights, my question to you would be, and I guess you could ask a few of your neighbors, how do they interpret those lights?
I would
That
interpret
seems to
them
be the thing.
as holiday lights, as
Okay.
as
So if
a Christian.
Danielle
Sorry,
was walking by, she would think,
I'm
oh, there's
sorry.
another Christian house
I would.
that you
I
can't
would.
look
I'm
pretty.
sorry.
So that,
Yeah.
by definition, would be making your life not so kosher.
Yeah.
So that would be sort of how you'd have to check it out. Like what's the, how are they viewed? Not your intention. Your intention is to create light. If you want light and you don't want any problems, just have like you know, like the old-fashioned way, like we have a light bulb on our porch, you know.
Maybe
My
a
neighbors have
menorah, maybe
lights
some
of-
blue and white. If I saw blue and white, if I saw blue and white,
like blue
if
and
I
white.
saw blue and white, if I
You would
saw a
know.
menorah, I'd be like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, then you
So,
wouldn't think.
so I mean, blue and white's good then.
At least in Danielle's, that's what I'm saying. Crystal, ask your
In my
neighbors.
eyes.
Send it 2 or 3 people.
Yeah.
And if the consensus is, yeah, like us, you're doing it just like we're doing it. We're decorating in red and green. You're decorating in white. You know, it's all part of the same season, the same great holiday atmosphere. Then it's a problem.
I think I know, like, deep down that I think I was trying to find a way to, like,
Make it
still,
kosher.
yeah. I mean, I know. Yeah.
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 So look for a light bulb. You know, look for something that's just obviously for light. I'm saying, like, I know a lot of people in my area have sensors. I mean, they're just lights. They go on when people walk by. They shut off, not. So nobody's thinking they have anything to do with the holiday. They have nothing to do with the holiday, and they're function year round, and they just give light. But yeah, that would be a good example of how subtle it could be, because you're saying, hey, it's not a pine tree, and it's white, and it's a snowflake. But nowadays, the snowflakes and the whites have all become wrapped up in the same.
I know, they've been grabbed onto and pulled into it. And it's like,
Exactly. And a lot of times we do have to, I mean, I do sometimes research what are the origins. And there are quite a number of things, especially in this country, like we were talking last week about Halloween, that of course nobody in America I mean, you have to be a really fanatically religious person to know there's any religious connection to Halloween, but there is. And its origins is pagan and Christian and, you know, and very much so. So even though the fact that nowadays the people that are going around in their, you know, Star Wars costumes have no clue, doesn't take away this is the roots, and therefore it's a problem to support it. Yeah, it's a problem to support it because it's supporting something that's rooted in idolatry, even though it's not being practiced in a religious fashion today, but it's still part of it. And going back to the tree, if a tree was planted for idolatrous purposes, that was the reason why the tree was planted. There's no more idolaters of that type around anyway. You still can't derive any benefit from that tree. You can't sit in the shade of the tree. You can't eat the fruits of the tree. You couldn't cut lumber from the tree. You could in no way benefit from this tree because in its inception, or any tree that was worshipped ever. Well, the tree, if the tree was worshipped, but they didn't do anything to the tree, you could still benefit from it. But if they planted the tree for their worship, you can't ever benefit from it, even if the worshipers aren't around. You know, because why? The worshipers ceased to exist 100 years ago. Because that energy is embedded in this tree. That was the reason for its existence. So therefore, it's still there. So if you have your snowflakes and you know that the manufacturers have made those snowflake lights, we're definitely think of seasonal decorations. They're not your religious people to think of seasonal decorations, but that's why they were assuming they would get to sell them. So again, you're connecting to that energy. We got to be very careful to connect to that energy. But I will see if I can find out anything about Black Friday. And if it's anything beyond just commercialism, I'll let you know. I don't think it is, but you never know. And definitely I will, for sure not Cyber Monday. I think we're all safe with that. And yeah, I mean, Danielle is raising a good point when we're talking about not patronizing stores that are decorated. If you have an option of decorated or non-decorated, it'll be interesting, you know, to see, you know, in you know, online retail, you know, are there decorated versus not decorated that that we could say, well, these indirectly I'm supporting the concept on some level because they're making sales this time of year, they're decorating, so I'm supporting that whole concept, as versus going to a place that's not decorated in an overtly Christian fashion. It could just be decorated in a winter fashion, but not in a Christian fashion. It's hard, especially this time of year. These things become a little subtle. You know, they definitely do, but our struggles with it are far easier than anything anyone had to endure for the past, you know, thousands of years. So definitely our problems are much less. The challenges are much less. The repercussions are much less. So this isn't as it used to be in terms of its enormous, the enormous difficulties worshipers of God. This time of year, traditionally for Jews, was an incredibly dangerous time of year. Like, it was so scary because it was just such an easy, ripe time for mobs to just, you know, in the name of God, you know, assault, vandalize, destroy, you know, seize whatever they could, because, you know, it's all just for service of God, of course. So thank God now we don't have those challenges. And every time we confront a challenge, we can always say sort of like what I say to myself in any of these areas, like, okay, God, I'm so glad I have an opportunity to overtly be serving you. You know, I'm not going into this store, I'm going to this store. Thank you for this opportunity to express my belief in you. Don't get so many opportunities to express my rejection of idolatry. Thank you for an opportunity to express my rejection of idolatry. Okay, have a wonderful week. If I find out anything about Black Friday, I will post it. If anyone else finds out anything about Black Friday, feel free to post as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all for attending. Be well. Have a great week. Take care. Good night.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Take care. I love you.
Thank
You
you.
too.
Thank you. Thank you. Shavuot Tov.